What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir stock, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, March 15th. Alright guys, Palantir stock here today down 57 cents per share. That's minus 2.28%. It is down about another 23 cents here in the after hours. Listen, you guys know, as always, volume in the after hours, unless there's a business-specific catalyst released after the bell, typically, volume's going to be shockingly low. It's very easy to bully stocks in the after hours. Take that all with a grain of salt. But let's get started here with our daily ritual, our daily volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, really quick, if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is 5,000 by market open Monday. I appreciate you climbing aboard. Let's jump in here. So, we're looking to pull out as much bias as we possibly can that we're really unable to see by simply looking at the price action. So what do I need to determine that, right? I need three things. I need big changes in volume. I need that to correlate with obvious moves in the stock price, which we'll start by circling those. But number three, it has to be outside of the context of what is typically expected during that time of day. So, the obvious moves that I'm interested in. That downside move there, this intraday fade and quick recovery, and then kind of a similar move into the close with some consolidation toward the bottom there. Now, let's take a look here, starting as is typical from left to right. So we can see here that opening candle, it's very common to see that be the largest candle of the day. Very common. That's not necessarily what we got here today, just barely. If you want to take out this first after hours candle, which we will talk about here, it's just barely the largest candle of the day, almost tied with this red one here. Now that is slightly unusual. Again, it's very common to see this opening candle be by far the biggest of the day. Not the case here today, but these two candles on that first fade that we saw shortly after the open, are those candles out of context? Well, they are. However, you guys know me. I like to see at least 3 to 4 consecutive candles of larger, consistently out of context volume. And we really only got 2. However, these were larger red candles. Keep in mind, though, that second candle was the bottoming candle of that particular move. And then we got a little bit of a reversal. Now, these 2 candles popped on volume big time. And then the volume quickly diminished as we turned the corner and headed back upside. However, again, we don't have 3, 4, 5 consecutive candles. We simply have 2. And on the second one, we had some nice wicking at the bottom. And again, it happened to be the reversal portion of this move. The reversal happened immediately after, at least in the short term. What that tells me is that the second candle that saw higher volume likely saw a little bit of added buying pressure compared to that first larger red candle, okay? Which tells me that it saw some more buying volume pumping up the second volume candle and a little bit more of a battle at that point, okay? So, it's pretty safe to say, in my opinion, that the bears overwhelmingly won this big red candle. They certainly got the jump and kind of set the tone for the day in that regard. But by the time that second candle rolled around, the bulls had poured in and started to try to put up a fight, which tells me this is kind of like a half win for bears. A full win would look like 4 consecutive candles of, 1.7 million shares per. That's just not what we got. We got one overwhelming candle and then a second candle that really tells me that a battle was going on and not all selling pressure. Just happened that the candle was red. Of course, every volume bar is going to have both buying and selling pressure. Obviously, however, this second candle to a higher degree. I think we saw a bigger chunk, being buying pressure compared to that first candle. Now, this move intraday where we saw kind of a fade and bounce back higher, again, we saw a similar deal where we just saw kind of one bar pop on the volume. And again, that happened to be a big wick on that bottom candle. And then that triggered the reversal. So again, we have kind of a battle candle here. So if you're in a chat room or Reddit or our free Discord or whatever here tonight, and you see someone talking about, hey, Palantir, they're pointing out different volume bars where they saw big selling pressure. I think they're talking their own book, if that makes sense. I don't think it's contextual enough. This, to me, is a battle candle that happened to turn red. Right, you could have had the same thing be green on a candle that reversed back downside. right? It tells an interesting story. You just have to interpret it outside of your position's bias. Now, this final move that we saw into the close, we saw a big fade consolidation and then pretty hard pump for a couple of candles into the close. Now, this is very contextual. We did see pretty heavy increasing volume into the close. I think that's well within reason of what's expected. Okay, so that move itself is kind of a wash. However, this first candle after the bell, very high. You know, what I've noticed, especially as of late, but really pretty consistently, this is very common in blue chips, okay? We see really big rebalancing volume candles on the first 5-minute bar after the bell. I believe it's institutions and funds doing big high volume rebalancing buys and sells after the bell. And you can notice that it was a really big green candle. However, the movement itself wasn't extraordinary, and it got a little bit of wicking on the upside, which tells me that this was probably a big mix of buys and sells, happened to turn green, perhaps, you know, off that momentum into the close. Institutional rebalancing, we might as well take that candle out as far as doing the analysis. Now, let's move on to the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels that I'm watching here tomorrow. So if you caught last night's Palantir video, we talked about how yesterday, which was Wednesday, we reclaimed that 50 period here on the 30-minute chart, a very, very commonly watched moving average on an incredibly popular time frame, the 50 period on the 30. We reclaimed that yesterday, held it into the close, but today, Thursday, I was very interested in seeing, okay, could we utilize that 50 period, get a nice clean bounce and bounce up toward that 200 period? And we weren't able to do that today. We gave it up in pre-market. We tried to make a retest off the open, didn't quite get there, but got very close, and then kind of faded hard and slowly faded lower the remainder of the day. But understand that even now, we currently find ourselves about 2.61% upside to make a retest of that 50 period. You know, today was a 2.3% red day. 2.6 is well within a reasonable range of a single day move on Palantir. So bulls, we have to consider that best case scenario, we'd pop up, reclaim that 50 period, ideally pop up through on high volume, retest on low volume, pull away hard on high volume. You know, a beautiful thing, I suppose, if we're talking best case scenario, we're talking a reclaim of the 200 period, but that's nearly 6% away. It's been done on Palantir, but as far as ATR is concerned, I think we need to discuss, obviously, the more realistic scenarios, the things that are going to happen more frequently. Bear is really simple for you guys. Any upside test that 50 period, the volume coming in to me doesn't matter as long as the rejection is on big high volume. And I would ideally, if I'm a bear, prefer to see this 50 period curl even more aggressively to the downside and head lower as soon as possible, gaining as much ground to the downside per day as possible. All right, now let's move on to the 4-hour chart here and take a look. You can see that yesterday we were talking very much so again about that 50 period on the 4-hour chart. We faded off of that here today. Let me zoom in actually a little bit more. We did see a test of that, very close at least, and a fade off of that as well. So that seems to be aligning with that moving average we discussed on the 30-minute. So that now sits here on the 4-hour chart in particular above $25 a share, about 4.21%. To the upside of away from where the stock currently sits. Understand that the 4-hour chart, it's flattening out. On the 30-minute, this 50 period curled downside, and it's much more quick to react to the newer stock movement. Whereas on the 4-hour, it's a lot slower to move, so it stays put, a lot longer. So listen, bulls, I mean, realistically, a reclaim of that would be wonderful, but just any move back in that general direction, of course. Not for the sake of it being upside because we're a bull and we want it to go up, right? But simply for the sake that I would love to see that 50 period get reclaimed at some point in the near future, especially because it's above $25 a share. Ideally, I think knowing what Palantir has done in the past, that 50 period staying above $25 a share, I think I would rather have that be the case if I'm a bull. That way we can attack 25 and then get above the 50 period, reclaim it, right? Ideally at some point in the near future if we're bulls, okay? But then we have a psychological barrier once that occurs between the stock price and the huge psychological level of $25 a share. It helps to beef up that level, okay? Now, bears. something I'm watching really closely. Of course, any retest of 25 or the 50 period, you don't want to see rejection, but I think more importantly, seeing that 50 period curl downside below 25 bucks a share as soon as possible is a big deal, because in a similar way, that adds a psychological barrier ahead of 25 bucks a share, okay, coming from below, and just beefs up that level in your favor as a potential resistance level, okay, which brings us to the most important chart of all, which is the daily. This one's the easiest to read, it's the most obvious, it's the most contextual, and it's the most psychological. Has the most eyeballs. Now, the really obvious story here, this was the story yesterday, and it remains the story with an added twist today. 25 bucks is huge. Guys, 25 is the undeniable psychological level that everyone's paying attention to right now. We currently find ourselves approximately, 2.1 about % away from a retest of 25 to the upside. Now, if I'm a bear here tomorrow looking at the daily, two things. Any upside test of 25, again, hard rejection on as much volume as possible. Very definitive, ideally. Okay? But I think primary kind of base case ideal scenario if you're a bear is get down below 24, spend as much time below 24 as possible, and close below 24. Again, I'm not talking for 4 minutes. I'm not talking for 32 minutes. I'm talking hours below 24, ideally, on let a lot of volume come in, big sample size agree, and close below 24. Another reclaim, it's kind of like a stair step, but to the downside. We're at a reclaim of another whole dollar area. Now, bulls, similar, but opposite. Any test of 24, hard, high volume bounce away from that level. Okay, and the real sights are kind of set on 25 bucks, because 25 is the most crucial level right now if you are a bull. And again, very similar to the downside for the bears, I don't mean reclaim 25 in the last 2 minutes of the day on low volume. I would love to see a hard, aggressive, high volume retake of 25 bucks a share, spend 4 hours above that level while above average volume flows in the entirety of that day, right, ideally, and then closing well above 25. That would be beautiful. That would be a massive power move, at least in the extremely short term if you're a bull. Now, let's take a look. What was the bias out of the options traders today as they position themselves heading into tomorrow? We had about 326,000 total contracts traded. And today now, we had 210,000 calls and about 116,000 puts. Relatively heavy call side bias out of Palantir here today. And as is typical, or as has been typical as of late on Palantir, every single delta range is leaning call heavy. Okay, now listen, we've certainly seen more extreme call heavy days in the recent past, but today was a 2.3% red day. We're still seeing a relatively heavy overall call side bias, and every delta range is still leaning call side heavy. As always, the options traders can be wrong, so just make sure your risk is managed at all times. Take it from me, over the years, I have learned the hard way, no one trade is worth knocking you out of the game, even just temporarily. It's not worth it. Never is. And I think most traders end up learning that the hard way. Please don't let yourself learn that the hard way. We have a big enough sample size of traders to tell you it's not the way to go, myself included. I was forced to learn that, and I suppose it did turn my risk management relatively pristine, but it took a little longer than I think it should have. Listen, if you guys want to get my personal daily scalp setup alerts, my personal swing trade setup alerts, my daily unusual options activity alerts, I've been tracking that for years to keep a finger on the pulse of what the big players are up to. Perhaps, it gives us some insight into maybe someone knows a little something. Anything that comes through with the publicly available information in the options chain that just seems off. I've been tracking it for years, well before I offered it as a service, and now I alert it to members of the gold server every day. And as well, platinum one-on-one coaching, that is with me. You can take a look at all 4 of those membership options at the link in the pinned comment. Also, recently I added, I'm alerting in-play stocks that have, in very recent, like these are basically as the day goes on, I'm alerting these as they're relevant. These are quick. They have to be traded, I think, with a micro scalp type mentality. If that's you, if that interests you, we're using hotkeys, things like this. Fast brokers, customized programmed macros. I have a pad of about 100 of them sitting right next to me, and that's just one of them. Those in-play stocks are a very quick, perfect risk management, micro scalp mentality. These are stocks that are moving, stocks that have elevated relative volume, and likely the most obvious stock for intraday traders at that particular moment in time. Scanners have historically been extremely expensive, so I decided that since I'm watching these every day, I might as well just alert them to the group. Every membership now includes those alerts as well. So again, all that at the link in the pinned comment. If you got value out of this video, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.